Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. Welcome back to part 3 of Joyce Carol Oates' Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been? So, if you're following along with me in your reading packet, we left off on page 55. And at this point in the story, Connie has just realized that Arnold Friend is not as young as he's claiming to be. So, Arnold has told Connie that he is 18 years old. And the more that she looks at him, she realizes that he is far older than that. So as we read some more of the story here, also I'd like you guys to keep in mind that some literary scholars have also interpreted Arnold Friend's character as being symbolic of Satan himself. So as we read more of the story, I'd like you guys to keep that in mind and try to pick up on some of the clues that are given that have led literary scholars to that belief. We know that Arnold Friend is supposed to embody the real life serial killer Charles Schmid, who killed 3 young girls in Arizona in the 1960s. But as I mentioned on my previous video, a lot of people who've studied this story have also come up with the claim that Arnold Friend is supposed to symbolize Satan himself, which is definitely a possibility. So see if you can pick up on some of those clues that are given, especially in Joyce Carol Oates' physical description of Arnold Friend as we read more of the story. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in. If you're following along with me, we're in the middle of page 55, kind of the upper middle of the page. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in. Here we go. Maybe you two better go away, Connie said faintly. What? How come? Arnold Friend cried. We come out here to take you for a ride. It's Sunday. He had the voice of the man on the radio now. It was the same voice, Connie thought. Don't you know it's Sunday all day? And honey, no matter who you were with last night, today you're with Arnold Friend. And don't you forget it. Maybe you better step out here, he said. And this last was in a different voice. It was a little flatter, as if the heat was finally getting to him. No, I got things to do. Hey, you two better leave. We ain't leaving until you come with us. Like hell I am. Connie, don't fool around with me. I mean, don't fool around, he said, shaking his head. He laughed incredulously. He placed his sunglasses on top of his head carefully as if he were indeed wearing a wig, and brought the stems down behind his ears. Connie stared at him, another wave of dizziness and fear rising in her so that for a moment he wasn't even in focus, but was just a blur standing there against his gold car. And she had the idea that he had driven up the driveway all right, but that he had come from nowhere before that and belonged nowhere, and that everything about him, and even about the music that was so familiar to her, was only half real. If my father comes and sees you, he ain't coming. He's at a barbecue. How do you know that? Aunt Tilly's. Right now, they're drinking, sitting around, he said vaguely, squinting as if he were staring all the way to town and over to Aunt Tilly's backyard. Then the vision seemed to get clear, and he nodded energetically. Yeah, sitting around. There's your sister in a blue dress, huh? And high heels, the poor sad broad. Nothing like you, sweetheart. And your mother's helping some fat woman with the corn. They're cleaning the corn, husking the corn. What fat woman? Connie cried. How do I know what fat woman? I don't know every stinking fat woman in the world. Arnold Friend laughed. Oh, that's Mrs. Hornsby. Who invited her? Connie said. She felt a little lightheaded. Her breath was coming quickly. She's too fat. I don't like them fat. I like them the way you are, honey. he said, smiling sleepily at her. They stared at each other for a while through the screen door. He said softly, "Now, what you're going to do is this. You're going to come out that door. You're going to sit up front with me, and Ellie's going to sit in the back." The hell with Ellie, right? This isn't Ellie's date. You're my date. I'm your man, honey. What? You're crazy. Yes, I'm your man. You don't know what that is, but you will, he said. I know that too. I know all about you. But look, it's real nice, and you couldn't ask for nobody better than me, or more polite. I always keep my word. I'll tell you how it is. I'm always nice at first. I'll hold you so tight you won't think you have to try to get away or pretend anything because you'll know you can't. You'll give in to me, and you'll love me. Shut up. You're crazy, Connie said. She backed away from the door. She put her hands up against her ears as if she'd heard something terrible, something not meant for her. People don't talk like that. You're crazy, she muttered. Her heart was almost too big now for her chest, and its pumping made sweat break out all over her. She looked out to see Arnold Friend pause and then take a step toward the porch, lurching. He almost fell, but like a clever drunken man, he managed to catch his balance. He wobbled in his high boots and grabbed hold of one of the porch posts. Honey, he said, you still listening? Get the hell out of here. Be nice, honey. Listen. I'm going to call the police. He wobbled again, and out of the side of his mouth came a fast spat curse, and a sigh not meant for her to hear. But even this, Christ, sounded forced. Then he began to smile again. She watched this smile come, awkward, as if he were smiling from inside a mask. His whole face was a mask, she thought wildly, tanned down to his throat, but then running out, as if he had plastered makeup on his face but had forgotten about his throat. Honey, listen. Here's how it is. I always tell the truth, and I promise you this. I ain't coming in that house after you. You better not. I'm going to call the police if you don't. Honey, he said, talking right through her voice. Honey, I'm not coming in there, but you are coming out here. You know why? She was panting. The kitchen looked like a place she had never seen before. Some room she had run inside, but that wasn't good enough, wasn't going to help her. The kitchen window had never had a curtain after 3 years, and there were dishes in the sink, for her to do, probably. And if you ran your hand across the table, you'd probably feel something sticky there. You listening, honey? Hey, I'm going to call the police. Soon as you touch the phone, I don't need to keep my promise and can come inside. You won't want that. She rushed forward and tried to lock the door. Her fingers were shaking. But why lock it? Arnold Friend said gently, talking right into her face. It's just a screen door. It's just nothing. One of his boots was a strange angle, as if his foot wasn't in it. It pointed out to the left, bent at the ankle. I mean, anybody can break through a screen door, and glass and wood and iron or anything else if he needs to. Anybody at all, and especially Arnold Friend. If the place got lit up with a fire, honey, you'd come running out into my arms, right into my arms and safe at home, like you knew I was your man and stopped fooling around. I don't mind a nice, shy girl, but I don't like no fooling around. Part of those words were spoken with a slight rhythmic lilt, and Connie somehow recognized them, the echo of a song from last year about a girl rushing into her boyfriend's arms and coming home again. Connie stood barefoot on the linoleum floor, staring at him. What do you want? She whispered. I want you, he said. What? Seen you that night and thought, that's the one. Yes, sir. I never needed to look anymore. But my father's coming back. He's coming to get me. I had to wash my hair first. She spoke in a dry, rapid voice, hardly raising it for him to hear. No, your daddy is not coming. And yes, you had to wash your hair and you washed it for me. It's nice and shining and all for me. I thank you, sweetheart, he said with a mock bow. But again, he almost lost his balance. He had to bend and adjust his boots. Evidently, his feet did not go all the way down. The boots must have been stuffed with something so that he would seem taller. Connie stared out at him and behind him at Ellie in the car, who seemed to be looking off toward Connie's right into nothing. Then Ellie said, pulling the words out of the air one after another as if he were just discovering them. You want me to pull out the phone? Shut your mouth and keep it shut, Ellie, Arnold Friend said. His face red from bending over, or maybe from embarrassment because Connie had seen his boots. This ain't none of your business. So I want to stop there and mention a couple things before we go any further. So first of all, I want to clarify the positioning of Connie and Arnold here where we are in the story. So Connie is actually standing inside of her house. She's standing behind a screen door, just inside of her house. And there's a porch then in front of the screen door. Arnold Friend is standing just off the porch. And so Arnold and Connie are actually talking with this screen door kind of barrier sort of between the two of them. So Connie's actually in her home at this point, talking to Arnold through this screen door. And Arnold is saying that he can't or won't come inside the house unless she touches the phone. To me, that always kind of reminded me a little bit of like kind of a vampire legend, like they can't come inside the house unless they're invited. It's always just kind of reminded me of that. He also makes a point of saying like, oh, it's just a screen door. I could get through it if I wanted to. Even wood or iron, if I could get through it if I really wanted to. That always reminds me of like the big bad wolf kind of scenario in that situation. So we hear mention of Arnold's face. Connie takes note of the fact that it looks like he's wearing makeup, but that he only had the makeup on his face and forgot about his throat. That could actually be a reference to Charles Schmid, the real life serial killer. Charles Schmid actually was known to wear makeup to try to make himself look younger because he was actually in his 20s, but he liked to hang around teenagers, so he wanted to make himself look a little younger. He also had this idea that he looked like Elvis Presley, so he wore makeup and hair grease to try to make himself look like Elvis. Charles Schmid actually was known to stuff his boots with newspaper to make himself look taller than he actually was. But the boot situation could also be a reference to Arnold Friend being the devil, having like cloven hooves that he is standing in boots, putting boots over the hooves, and he can't walk very well in those boots with his cloven hooves in there. So that could be another reference to Arnold Friend being the devil. He's wobbly in those boots. He keeps having to hold on to things, grab hold of things to keep himself steady, to keep himself from falling over. And Connie's taking note of that. So that's another kind of indication that Arnold Friend may be symbolic of Satan himself. So we'll keep going here. Right now we're on page 58 toward the top here. So Ellie, Arnold's friend, has asked Arnold if he wants the phone pulled out, and Arnold just tells him to shut up. What? What are you doing? What do you want? Connie said. If I call the police, they'll get you. They'll arrest you. Promise was not to come in unless you touch that phone. And I'll keep that promise, he said. He resumed his erect position and tried to force his shoulders back. He sounded like a hero in a movie, declaring something important, but he spoke too loudly, and it was as if he were speaking to someone behind Connie. I ain't made plans for coming in that house where I don't belong, but just for you to come out to me the way you should. Don't you know who I am? You're crazy, she whispered. She backed away from the door, but did not want to go into another part of the house, as if this would give him permission to come through the door. You're crazy, Huh? What are you saying, honey? Her eyes darted everywhere in the kitchen. She could not remember what it was, this room. This is how it is, honey. You come out and we'll drive away. Have a nice ride. But if you don't come out, we're going to wait till your people come home. And then they're all going to get it. You want that telephone pulled out? Ellie said. He held the radio away from his ear and grimaced, as if without the radio, the air was too much for him. I told you, shut up, Ellie, Arnold's friend said. You're deaf. Get a hearing aid, right? Fix yourself up. This little girl's no trouble and is going to be nice to me. So, Ellie, keep to yourself. This ain't your date, right? Don't hem in on me. Don't hog. Don't crush. Don't bird dog. Don't trail me, he said in a rapid, meaningless voice, as if he were running through all the expressions he'd learned, but was no longer sure which of them was in style, then rushing on to new ones, making them up with his eyes closed. Don't crawl under my fence. Don't squeeze in my chipmunk hole. Don't sniff my glue. Don't steal my popsicle. Keep your own greasy fingers on yourself. He shaded his eyes and peered in at Connie, who was backed against the kitchen table. Don't mind him, honey. He's just a creep. He's a dope, right? I'm the boy for you. And like I said, you come out here nice like a lady and give me your hand, and nobody else gets hurt. I mean, your nice old bald-headed daddy and your mummy and your sister in her high heels. Because listen, why bring them into this? Leave me alone, Connie whispered. Hey, you know that old woman down the road? The one with the chickens and stuff? You know her? She's dead. Dead? What? You know her? Arnold's friend said. She's dead. Don't you like her? She's dead. She isn't here anymore. But don't you like her? I mean, you got something against her? Some grudge or something? Then his voice dipped as if he were conscious of a rudeness. He touched the sunglasses perched up on top of his head as if to make sure they were still there. Now, you be a good girl. What are you going to do? Just 2 things, or maybe 3, Arnold's friend said. But I promise it won't last long, and you'll like me the way you get to like people you're close to. You will. It's all over for you here, so come on out. You don't want your people in any trouble, do you? She turned and bumped against a chair or something, hurting her leg, but she ran into the back room and picked up the telephone. Something roared in her ear, a tinny roaring, and she was so sick with fear that she could do nothing but listen to it. The telephone was clammy and very heavy, and her fingers groped down to the dial but were too weak to touch it. She began to scream into the phone, into the roaring. She cried out. She cried for her mother. She felt her breath start jerking back and forth in her lungs as if it were something Arnold's friend were stabbing her with, again and again with no tenderness. A noisy, sorrowful wailing rose all about her, and she was locked inside it the way she was locked inside this house. After a while, she could hear again. She was sitting on the floor with her wet back against the wall. Arnold's friend was saying from the door, "That's a good girl. Put the phone back." She kicked the phone away from her. "No, honey. Pick it up. put it back right. She picked it up and put it back. The dial tone stopped. That's a good girl. Now, you come outside. She was hollow with what had been fear but was now just an emptiness. All that screaming had blasted it out of her. She sat, one leg cramped under her, and deep inside her brain was something like a pinpoint of light that kept going and would not let her relax. She thought, I'm not going to see my mother again. She thought, I'm not going to sleep in my bed again. Her bright green blouse was all wet. Arnold's friend said, in a gentle, loud voice that was like a stage voice, the place where you came from ain't there anymore. And where you had in mind to go is canceled out. This place you are now, inside your daddy's house, is nothing but a cardboard box I can knock down anytime. You know that, and always did know it. You hear me? She thought, I have got to think. I have got to know what to do. We'll go out to a nice field out in the country here where it smells so nice and it's sunny, Arnold's friend said. And I'll have my arms tied around you so you won't need to try to get away. And I'll show you what love is like, what it does. The hell with this house. It looks solid, all right, he said. He ran a fingernail down the screen, and the noise did not make Connie shiver as it would have the day before. Now, put your hand on your heart, honey. Feel that? That feels solid too, but we know better. Be nice to me. Be sweet like you can, because what else is there for a girl like you but to be sweet and pretty and give in and get away before her people come back? She felt her pounding heart. Her hand seemed to enclose it. She thought for the first time in her life that it was nothing that was hers, that belonged to her, but just a pounding, living thing inside this body that wasn't really hers either. You don't want them to get hurt, Arnold's friend went on. Now get up, honey. Get up all by yourself. She stood. Now, turn this way. That's right. Come over here to me. Ellie, put that away. Didn't I tell you, you dope? You miserable, creepy dope, Arnold's friend said. His words were not angry, but only part of an incantation. The incantation was kindly. Now, come out through the kitchen to me, honey, and let's see a smile. Try it. You're a brave, sweet little girl. And now they're eating corn and hot dogs cooked to bursting over an outdoor fire. And they don't know one thing about you and never did. And honey, you're better than them, because not a one of them would have done this for you. Connie felt the linoleum under her feet. It was cool. She brushed her hair back out of her eyes. Arnold's friend let go of the post, tentatively, and opened his arms for her, his elbows pointing in toward each other, and his wrists limp to show that this was an embarrassed embrace and a little mocking. He didn't want to make her self-conscious. She put her hand against the screen. She watched herself push the door slowly open, as if she were back safe somewhere in the other doorway. Watching this body and this head of long hair moving out into the sunlight where Arnold's friend waited. My sweet little blue-eyed girl, he said in a half-sung sigh that had nothing to do with her brown eyes but was taken up just the same by the vast sunlit reaches of the land behind him and on all sides of him. So much land that Connie had never seen before and did not recognize, except to know that she was going to it. And that concludes our reading of Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been? I want to thank you all for tuning in. I'd love to hear your comments. Um, if you want to know more about the true story behind the incident that inspired Joyce Carol Oates to write Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been? I'd like to encourage you to do some research into the Charles Schmid murders that were committed in Arizona in 1964 and 1965. Charles Schmid wound up being nicknamed the Pied Piper of Tucson. And a Life magazine article was written about the murders that Charles Schmid committed. And Joyce Carol Oates read that newspaper article, or that magazine article, and was inspired to write this story based on those real life murders committed by Charles Schmid. He actually murdered 3 teenage girls. The true story is pretty disturbing. Namely that he had accomplices and that a lot of people, he bragged about committing these murders, but no one turned him in. There's an investigation discovery documentary that you can actually access depending on your TV provider. If you go to, if you just Google investigation discovery, A Crime to Remember was the show, the series that was run, and the episode is called The Pied Piper. I'd encourage you to watch that documentary to do a little more digging into the actual murders that inspired Joyce Carol Oates to write the story. Thank you again for tuning in. Comments, always welcome. Thank you especially to my students who are watching. I appreciate you guys, and I miss you all so much. I look forward to seeing you soon. Have a great one.